I never thought 10 minutes could feel so dangerous. When I stepped into her kitchen, the air itself seemed heavier, scented with apples and something unspoken. She moved around the room slowly, deliberately, as if aware that every step, every glance could draw me closer. Her white t-shirt clung in the quietest ways, the neckline falling just enough to catch my eye. Though I tried to look away, she noticed, of course. She always noticed. "Sit," she said softly, placing a cup in front of me. As she leaned forward, her arm brushed mine. It was nothing and everything. My hand froze on the table, inches from hers, heat racing up my arm. The storm outside deepened, thunder rumbling like a warning. She tilted her head and smiled. "So, do you like me?" The words were playful, but her eyes pinned me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I came to help with the kettle," I muttered, but it sounded absurd even to me. She lit a candle when the lights flickered out, and the glow painted her face in soft gold. Shadows curved along her collarbone, the delicate line of her neck. She pushed the candle closer, and in that narrow space, our hands hovered, almost meeting. I could hear her breathing too close, too long. She began to talk about loneliness, about nights when silence pressed too hard. But her voice was low, hushed, as if each word were meant only for me. I leaned in without realizing, drawn by the warmth of her tone, the way her lips shaped the words. Another crash of thunder shook the glass, and she startled. Her hand shot across the table, clutching my wrist. She didn't let go. My pulse hammered beneath her touch. We sat like that, eyes locked, the silence between us trembling. Slowly, she released me, her fingers brushing against mine in retreat. She laughed softly, but it carried no humor, only a question she dared not voice. "You should probably go," she whispered, leaning back, though her body didn't move far enough. I rose halfway, my heart racing. But then she leaned in again, her lips near my ear. "Or stay," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "Stay a little longer." The candle flickered, the storm roared, and I knew. The night had only just begun. The storm lingered into the evening, drumming against the windows like a restless heartbeat. I should have left hours ago, but something in her voice, in her eyes, kept me rooted to the chair. The candle between us had melted low, its light trembling as though it too sensed the tension. She poured more coffee, her hands steady, her gaze anything but. "You're quieter than usual," she said, almost teasing, almost concerned. "I'm just listening," I murmured. But the truth was, I was fighting myself. Every glance at her felt dangerous, every silence unbearable. She leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other. The movement was ordinary, innocent even, but the soft curve of her knee caught the light, and I had to look away. She noticed, of course. Her smile curved, knowing, but she said nothing. When lightning flared, the room glowed white for an instant. In that flash, I saw her watching me closer than before. I hadn't noticed her move, yet suddenly her chair was only a breath away from mine. "You make it too easy," she whispered. My pulse slept. "What do you mean?" Her eyes didn't blink. "You keep pretending you don't want to look at me." I tried to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. She reached out, her fingers brushing the back of my hand, barely touching, then retreating. It was the smallest gesture, and it set fire beneath my skin. The thunder rolled again and the lights flickered back to life for a moment, then died. In the sudden dark, I heard her soft laugh. "I suppose we're trapped." Her silhouette leaned closer, close enough that her breath warmed my cheek. I froze, every muscle alive with tension, waiting for what might happen next. Then she pulled back just enough to deny me, her smile wicked and tender all at once. "You look terrified," she whispered. "Maybe I am," I admitted. Her hand rested on my shoulder for the briefest second, then slipped away. "Don't be," she said, her voice low, steady. "It's only a storm." But the storm outside felt smaller than the one between us. By the time the clock struck midnight, the rain had softened, but the silence between us had grown heavier. The candle's flame quivered in the draft from the window, shadows swaying across the walls. She sat close, closer than before, as though the hours had slowly erased the space we once tried to keep. She held her cup with both hands, staring at the dark swirl of coffee as if reading something in it. Then, without looking up, she asked, "Do you ever wonder what people would say if they saw us right now?" The question struck me harder than I expected. My throat tightened, probably more than they should. I managed. Finally. She lifted her eyes, blue and sharp in the flickering light. "Exactly." She smiled faintly, as if daring me to argue. The storm outside gave one last rumble, a soft warning. She rose and crossed to the window, brushing the curtain aside. Her silhouette stood outlined by the faint street light, her hair catching the glow in loose waves. From where I sat, the sight was disarming, ordinary, and yet unbearably magnetic. I stood too, almost without meaning to, and found myself a step behind her. The sound of rain on glass filled the silence. She turned her head slightly, aware of me. "You're too quiet again," she whispered. I swallowed the words, refusing to come. My hand hovered in the air, wanting to reach her shoulder to close the distance, but I stopped, trembling with hesitation. She noticed the movement anyway, and instead of pulling away, she leaned back just enough that her hair brushed against my arm. The world seemed to shrink. I could smell the faint perfume in her hair, hear the slow rhythm of her breath. My chest ached with the weight of what I wasn't saying. She turned then suddenly, and for a heartbeat our faces were only inches apart. The candle light caught in her eyes, and I felt everything inside me lurch forward. She didn't move. I didn't either. It was the moment that hovered like a held breath. One step, one decision, and nothing would be the same. Her lips parted, the beginning of a word or something else. My pulse thundered. I leaned closer, and then from the hallway a sudden knock rattled her door. We both froze. The sound echoed through the apartment, shattering the fragile spell. She stepped back quickly, her hand flying to her chest, her expression unreadable. "Probably a neighbor," she whispered, though her voice trembled. She didn't move to answer. Neither did I. We stood in the half-light, the storm fading, the knock already gone, but the space between us burned hotter than ever. The knock never came again. Whoever it was had vanished into the night, leaving only silence and the echo of what almost happened. She stood frozen near the window, her hand pressed to her chest, eyes lowered. I wanted to speak, to say something that would break the weight between us, but no words seemed enough. Finally, she laughed softly, though it was a fragile sound. "You see, even the walls don't approve." I shook my head. "It's not the walls I'm worried about." She looked up then, and the faintest trace of mischief returned to her face. "So, you are worried?" The candle sputtered, threatening to go out. She reached to steady it, her fingers brushing dangerously close to mine. For a second, we both froze, our hands suspended over the same flame. I could feel the warmth of her skin without touching, and it made my heart pound harder than any storm. She drew in a slow breath. "It's late," she whispered. "I know." "Then why are you still here?" Her tone wasn't accusing. It was inviting, daring me to answer honestly. I hesitated, then said the only truth I could find. "Because you asked me to stay." The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. She stepped closer, so near I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind only laughter and time could carve. She lifted her hand, then hesitated, and finally rested it against my arm. It was such a simple touch, but it unraveled me. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my hand cover hers. Her skin was warm, softer than I had imagined. We stayed like that, standing in her kitchen, bound by a touch that neither of us had dared until now. She looked up at me, her lips parting as though she wanted to say something but couldn't. The distance between us was nothing now, just a breath, a choice. My pulse thundered, urging me forward. But then she closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against my shoulder instead. It was not a kiss, not even close. Yet it felt more intimate than anything. I wrapped my arm around her cautiously, afraid to break the moment. We stood in the dim light, her breath steady against me, my heart racing. There was no storm outside now, only the storm inside both of us. After what felt like forever, she whispered, "If you stay, everything changes." I tightened my hold just slightly, enough for her to know I'd heard. Maybe it already has. The candle finally gave out, plunging us into darkness. But in that darkness, I felt her hand squeeze mine. The candle had died, but neither of us moved to relight it. We sat in the dim hush, shadows folding around us, the storm outside already a memory. Her hand still rested in mine. And though the room was silent, my chest was louder than thunder. At last, she whispered, "You should go before morning comes." But she didn't let go. Her fingers tightened instead, betraying her words. I leaned closer, searching her face in the half-darkness. "Do you really want me to?" Her breath caught. For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes glistening with something unguarded, something raw. Then softly, "No." The word hung between us like a secret too fragile to touch. My hand slid over hers, holding it firmly now. She drew in a trembling breath, her shoulders rising. And when she looked at me, it was no longer with mischief. It was with surrender. "I've been alone for so long," she murmured. "And when you look at me like that, I forget the years." I felt the tightness in my throat, the weight of everything unspoken. I wanted to close the distance to silence the storm inside me. Instead, I reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. My fingers lingered, tracing the warmth of her skin. She didn't flinch. She leaned into the touch, her lips parting just slightly. The room pulsed with silence, charged with what almost was. I bent closer, close enough to feel her breath graze my own. She tilted her head, her eyes fluttering shut. It would have been so easy, one more step, but I stopped, not from fear, but from something deeper. Respect, restraint, the knowledge that if it happened, it had to be hers as much as mine. Her eyes opened slowly, searching me, surprised at my hesitation. Then she smiled. Not mischievous this time, but tender, aching. "You're different," she whispered. I pressed my forehead lightly to hers, letting the closeness speak for me. "I don't want 10 minutes with you," I said. "I want everything." Her breath shivered out, her hands clutching at mine. For a long moment we stayed like that, foreheads touching, hearts racing, the space between our lips alive with 1,000 unsaid things. Outside, the first pale light of dawn crept through the window. She glanced toward it, then back to me, her smile bittersweet. 10 hours, she said softly. "And now what happens?" I didn't answer because the truth was I didn't know. All I knew was that leaving no longer felt possible. The morning light filled the room, and with her hands still in mine, I realized my life had already changed.